Trump targets Canada's lumber, U.S. homes pay.
Lumber war explodes, housing costs surge this winter.
Carney confronts Trump, America's housing market on edge.
Tariff shock hits, families face sky-high costs.
Housing was already breaking families. Mortgages stretched thin, rents climbing, savings evaporating. But now, Trump's new lumber tariffs threaten to detonate costs overnight. Canada's economy is buckling under the pressure, its Prime Minister, Mark Carney, fighting for survival. And the shock is crossing the border fast. This winter, the frame of your house, the beams above your head, even the plywood under your roof could cost more than ever before. America thought tariffs would protect it, but instead, they may become the very spark that makes homes unaffordable for millions. Let's start with a simple question. Why does lumber matter so much? Because it's everywhere. It's not just the frame of a new house. It's the furniture you sit on, the cabinets in your kitchen, the flooring beneath your feet. And in America, a staggering quarter of this lumber supply flows directly from one place, Canada. When you strike at that supply, the tremors ripple instantly through the housing market, through construction, through families. Now picture this. President Trump, determined to prove that America will no longer be cheated on trade, slams down a fresh 10% tariff on Canadian soft lumber. He justifies it as fairness, arguing Canada has subsidized its producers for decades, undercutting U.S. mills. On paper, it sounds like a tough defense of American jobs, but in practice, it's about to set off a price spiral with no easy escape. Let's talk numbers. Home builders across the country are sounding the alarm. Tariffs don't stay on paper. They translate directly into higher material costs, and that translates into higher home prices. Industry estimates suggest that tariffs like these can add several $1,000s to the cost of constructing a single-family home. Not hundreds, thousands.
Think of the average American couple trying to buy their first house, already struggling with high interest rates, already squeezed by inflation in groceries and fuel. Now imagine walking into a builder's office and discovering your dream home is suddenly $7,000 more expensive purely because of cross-border politics. That's not a theory, that's the real-world math. And it doesn't stop there. Tariffs on wood products ripple into cabinets, vanities, furniture, and flooring. Renovations cost more, apartments cost more. Even repairing storm damage this winter could cost more than families can afford. This is not an abstract policy fight, it's a direct hit to the wallet. While Americans brace for higher costs across the border, Canada is staggering. The unemployment rate has climbed above 7%, the highest in nearly a decade. Sawmills, auto plants, and steel operations are shedding jobs. Mark Carney, Canada's Prime Minister, once a celebrated central banker, is walking into Washington under enormous pressure. His mission? Convince Trump to ease up, secure exemptions, salvage what he can for Canadian workers whose livelihoods depend on exporting cars, steel, aluminum, and especially lumber. But Carney is walking into a storm. Trump sees these tariffs as leverage. Here's the deeper layer. The United States, Canada, and Mexico are bound by the USMCA trade pact. It was meant to guarantee freer trade across North America, but Trump has learned how to use tariffs as a weapon, dangling the threat of dismantling the pact to extract better deals. Every tariff slapped on Canada isn't just about lumber. It's a bargaining chip, a signal, a warning that unless Canada bends, USMCA itself could unravel.
That's the bigger fear, because if the deal collapses, tariffs won't be limited to lumber or autos. They could spread across sectors: food, energy, technology, the very arteries of cross-border trade. And for Americans, that would mean one thing: a surge in prices far beyond housing. So why press this hard? Why risk political backlash from American consumers? Because in Trump's playbook, tariffs serve three purposes. They project strength. They tell his base he's punishing outsiders instead of letting America be taken advantage of. They create bargaining pressure. By pushing Canada into crisis, he increases U.S. leverage in trade talks. They shield certain industries. American lumber mills, especially in the South and Northwest, stand to gain in the short term as Canadian imports shrink. To Trump, that's a win. But the contradiction is brutal. The very policy meant to save American jobs may instead bleed American families dry with higher costs. Picture a young family in Texas planning to build a starter home. Picture retirees in Florida hoping to renovate after hurricane season. Picture renters in New York watching construction slow and rents tech higher as builders pass costs along. Every one of them is caught in the crossfire of this tariff war. They didn't choose it. They can't avoid it. but they'll pay for it. In mortgages, in rent, in monthly bills that climb quietly, invisibly, until the damage is too heavy to ignore. And that's why this fight isn't just headlines about Trump and Carney. It's about whether ordinary Americans can still afford the roof over their heads.
But here's the question that no one dares answer out loud. Is this tariff war a temporary shock or the opening move in dismantling the very trade system America depends on? Because if the USMCA cracks, if allies splinter, if tariffs spread, the cost of lumber today could be nothing compared to the economic earthquake waiting tomorrow. The question hangs heavy. Is this just a temporary shock or the first crack in the foundation of America's entire trade system? History tells us something chilling. Tariffs rarely stay isolated. They spread, they escalate. One sector becomes two, then three. Steel, aluminum, lumber, all linked. And suddenly, what began as a targeted strike turns into a full-scale economic war. The danger is not just Canada's lumber mills shutting down. The danger is the unraveling of confidence between nations that trade billions every day. Think about it. The US and Canada are not enemies. They are allies, bound by geography and security. Yet today, they stand across the table like adversaries, each holding tariffs as weapons. What happens when allies can no longer trust each other? Let's go deeper. Lumber tariffs don't just raise costs for new homes, they ripple outward. Renters pay more because developers stop building. Furniture buyers pay more because wood imports are hit with extra charges. Renovators face higher bills for cabinets, floors, and plywood. And repair costs after storms or natural disasters rise sharply, leaving families exposed. Now imagine layering this with other tariffs on cars, metals, even food. The result? An economy where every price tag is heavier, every family budget thinner. This is how a policy framed as protection mutates into a cycle of inflation, and inflation, once unleashed, spares no one.
Across the border, Canada is already straining, unemployment climbing, trade deficits widening, mills laying off workers. Prime Minister Mark Carney knows the stakes. His leadership is on trial. Every day that tariffs bite deeper, his political survival becomes more fragile. That's why he flies to Washington again and again, pleading for exemptions, bargaining for relief. But here's the brutal truth. Carney's leverage is shrinking. Canada needs access to the US market far more than the US needs Canadian imports. Trump knows this. He uses it. And that imbalance makes Canada's crisis America's bargaining chip. Why press so hard? Because Trump is betting on one calculation, that Americans will absorb higher short-term costs in exchange for the promise of long-term strength. He frames tariffs as a patriotic duty, a sacrifice for sovereignty, a price for independence. But is that promise real? Or is it a political illusion where the pain is permanent and the gain never arrives? Behind the lumber fight looms something far larger, the fate of the USMCA trade pact. This agreement was designed to stabilize North America, replacing NAFTA with a framework meant to secure free trade in cars, agriculture, and energy. But Trump views it not as a guarantee, but as leverage. Every tariff signals renegotiate or watch the deal collapse. If USMCA unravels, it won't just be lumber at stake. It will be autos, electronics, and food crossing borders. It will be tens of billions in daily trade flows suddenly taxed.
For ordinary Americans, that means one thing: the price of almost everything, from groceries to gas to gadgets, rising sharply. The housing shock of this winter could become the template for every sector. And the world is watching. China, Europe, Mexico, nations that trade with America are learning a lesson. If Trump can do this to Canada, a close ally, what might he do to them? That fear pushes countries to hedge their bets, to diversify away from US markets, to build trade alliances elsewhere. Over time, America's leverage erodes. Tariffs project strength in the moment, but they also plant seeds of long-term isolation. Meanwhile, back home, the burden is not evenly shared. Wealthy homeowners can absorb higher costs. Corporations can pass them along. But middle-class families, first-time buyers, renters, they are the ones crushed. A $7,000 hike on a new home can mean the difference between buying and walking away. A $200 increase on monthly rent can push families into debt or homelessness. These are not abstract numbers, they are the daily lives of Americans. And that's the contradiction of tariffs. They promise to protect American workers, but in practice, they punish the very families they claim to defend. So where does this go? 3 scenarios emerge. De-escalation.
Carney secures exemptions, Trump claims victory, tariffs ease. Housing prices stabilize, though not without damage. Stalemate. Tariffs remain, both leaders dig in, housing costs climb, and trade tensions simmer for years. Escalation. Trump extends tariffs beyond lumber, USMCA unravels, and North America plunges into a full-scale trade crisis. Which future unfolds depends on the next few months, and here's the unspoken question. What happens when the cost of political theater becomes unbearable for ordinary citizens?
When families realize their sacrifices were not for jobs gained, but for bills unpaid. When the promise of protection collides with the reality of higher rents, higher mortgages, higher debt. At what point do Americans stop believing the story and start demanding the truth? Tariffs are not just numbers on a balance sheet. They are choices. They are gambles. They are political weapons disguised as economic policy. Trump wields them as leverage. Carney resists them for survival. But the people caught in the middle are not presidents or prime ministers. They are families. They are workers. They are you. So as winter arrives, remember this. The lumber in your walls, the beams above your head, the roof sheltering your family, they are no longer just wood. They are the front line of a trade war. And the real question is not whether Trump wins or Carney loses,